What's up, y'all? Hope you're having a good day. Hope you're having a good week as always. I always see myself in the mirror here. I'm like trying to untangle my hair. Anyway, I want to talk about the El Paso shooter again. You know, I don't like to talk about this stuff that much. Like I said, I'm not interested in tragedies and theories, conspiracy theories and lies and confusion and all that stuff in times of, tragedy like this. But no journalists are really doing good work when it comes to the El Paso shooter, and there's a lot of very, very suspicious things that I've learned after I made my last video that kind of changed everything. And this is something that some journalists should probably look at. I don't know who is supposed to be doing journalism. Obviously, pretty much nobody in the mainstream. But the shooter's dad is a spiritual healer. He's on video, saying some interesting stuff, and also I'm coming to the conclusion that after a week of the media screaming white supremacy, I'm not even quite sure that the shooter identifies as white. And it says that nowhere in his manifesto. So we're going to go over a few of these things. We're going to connect some dots. And I just want to say before we start, we're going to wait about 30 seconds for everyone to get in. I'm not a whistleblower. I'm not an activist. I'm not releasing any information that isn't publicly available all over the internet, either via video form or on MSN, Daily Mail, Washington Post, you name it. Pretty much everyone's talking about this stuff. So I just want to say that. I'm not a whistleblower. I'm not a leaker. This is not classified information. This is all over the place, and you can research it for yourself, because there's a lot of very, very strange stuff going on with this guy's father. And, I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm not saying there's no coincidences. Please don't do any of that. Don't pressure anybody. Don't ever go out. You get what I'm saying? Be kind, be calm, be cool. Don't take this as a reason to do anything weird or leave his family alone. They deserve peace and privacy in this time. But I'm just questioning some public information, and some journalists should do this work. So we'll just start it before. All right, so I'm gonna just play a video clip real quick. This is his father. So this is all over Daily Mail, the website Heavy. I'm gonna read it real quick. Patrick Crusius is the guy who they're saying did the El Paso shooter. So this is a Heavy article, heavy.com. It says Patrick Crusius' dad, John Brian Crusius, fast facts you need to know. Once again, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not blowing up this guy's spot. I'm simply just reading a website that's publicly available. His father is John Brian Crusius, set up a fundraiser for a gun violence victim. Interesting. So, he set up a fundraiser for a victim of gun violence who was shot outside his Texas home, a musician who got badly injured. That's very nice of him. He's a mental health counselor and some sort of spiritual guy. On his website, he says he treats people with struggling alcohol, codependent, substance abuse, and PSTD. This is the part I really wanted to talk about. He wrote a whole book about addiction. I know I always say not to point fingers, but we know that our country is very, very overprescribed. A lot of these people who do crazy stuff are usually almost always mentally ill or on some sort of crazy drug. But his father wrote a book that discusses his own dependence on drugs after he was diagnosed with adult ADHD in 2001 and was prescribed benzos and antidepressants at the time. So that's one thing that I've mentioned as well. They tried to say I had ADD when I was younger, and they tried to fill me up with all sorts of pills. Luckily, my mom didn't allow me to do that, but that's his father. And then he found spiritual healing. But listen to a little clip of something he says, and then we're going to talk about it. I'm not suggesting anything. I just think that this is interesting and someone needs to look into it.
Yes. I had a group of healers that were trained by John of God in Brazil who came through wanting to rent my space. I rented the space to them and helped them unload their van.
All right, so I don't know if you could hear that, but he says he had a group of healers who were trained by John of God come to his space and want to rent it out, so he rented it out. If you don't know who John of God is, John of God's a faith healer, according to Daily Mail. Got arrested in Brazil this last year, kept teenagers as sex slaves, and sold their babies for up to 40,000 L. I don't know exactly what that means, before shipping them from Brazil to Europe. According to the New York Post, this is all mainstream information, John of God, cult leader, allegedly ran child sex slave farms. So I'm not saying that there's a lot of people, and I'm going to read another article just to give you the counter perspective, because I'm not suggesting everybody who ever worked with John of God is in on it. That's not true. This is a Huffington Post article. It says, I found healing with a famed spiritualist. Then he was arrested as a sexual predator. So you have to understand that a lot of people who worked with John of God, I'm sure, had no idea what he was doing. I'm not saying everybody's in on it. But the strange part about this is multiple things. One, his father was some sort of spiritual healer who worked with people trained by John of God. John of God kept teenagers as sex slaves. He was, doing a lot of really weird stuff. And I just want to read an article real quick, and then I'm going to get back to the story, because these are just things that I saw over the last week. This came out 5 days ago, and almost no one talked about it. In the Independent, it says Jeffrey Epstein, who's in jail now, wanted to seed human race with his DNA by impregnating up to 20 women, report says. Financer also expressed an interest in freezing his head and his penis. Jeffrey Epstein hoped to seed the human race with his DNA by impregnating women at a ranch in New Mexico, according to a report that's detailed apparently having interest. Okay, so the reason I'm reading that is because John of God gets arrested in Brazil. Apparently the woman who came forward and said he was doing stuff killed herself, committed suicide. On that note, I feel amazing. I'm not remotely depressed, on drugs, none of that. I feel awesome, would never do that. So just a side note. Then Jeffrey Epstein, it comes out in the news and no one's saying this, it's fine. They're saying, he just wanted to seed his human race with his DNA by impregnating 20 women at a time. I'm not saying he did it, that might have been his agenda, but when you have in mainstream reporting that John of God is having some sort of sex farm, this is the type of evil and grossness that most people can't even fathom. My mind would have never even gone here over 2 weeks ago. I didn't even know this was possible. So according to reports, allegedly, I'm not saying I know this for sure. I have no idea. I'm a news analyst. I read what's on the news. They're saying that John of God was having some sort of sex child farm where he would impregnate women and then sell the babies. And then you find out that Jeffrey Epstein was planning to impregnate people with his own DNA. I'm not saying he was going to do that. I have no idea. That's for the police force and law enforcement to figure out. But how come no journalist is talking about that? Maybe he was trying to run his own little sex slave child selling farm himself. Maybe not. Back to Brian's dad. Back to the El Paso shooter's dad. I'm not saying he knows anything. I'm not saying that. I just think it's a little strange that just as a consumer of news myself, Jeffrey Epstein gets arrested. Someone almost kills him in jail, so he almost dies. Then there's a shooter, and this is the also interesting part that I want to talk about. I'm suggesting nothing. I know nothing. I think people should leave, the family alone and not do any, just like leave people alone, leave them to their peace. Just analyze the news, and that's what you're allowed to do as a citizen. But the news comes out and they say this guy's a white supremacist. Even I said that because there are obviously white supremacists. This is not even debatable. There's disgusting, really bad people who believe that their race is genetically superior in all races, and there's definitely, issues on the fringe, absolutely. But the weird part about it is the entire media, including the right wing, Fox News, Ben Shapiro, Donald Trump wants to do gun control, Dan Crenshaw wants to do gun control, all the Second Amendment conservatives want to do gun control. They're all screaming white supremacists, the left wing screaming white supremacists, they're all screaming white supremacists. Now that I see his father, I have to ask myself the question, is he even white to begin with? I'll tell you two reasons. One, he wrote a whole manifesto. I read it yesterday just to report on it, and not once did he mention that he was white. Do you know any? I'm just asking you. Do you know any white supremacist who doesn't mention the fact that they're white? It's a red flag for sure. I would say his Twitter, he's arguing with vegans and animal activists on Twitter, and he's saying God gave me the right to eat animals. That's what his Twitter said, according to all, they shut his Twitter down. And then in his manifesto, he doesn't mention God one time. So he's a white supremacist who's against race mixing, who didn't even mention being white one time. He was anti-immigrant, pro-environment, nothing like any white supremacist I can't say that I'm very familiar with the white supremacy movement, but nothing like any right-winger. The whole media blames Donald Trump and blames conservatives, although this guy had nothing to do with it. Then all the right wing says it's a white supremacist and says, oh my God, this guy's a white supremacist. He never said he was even white. And then you see a picture of his father standing behind a Star of David. Once again, all white people are not to blame for white supremacy. All white people are not to blame for white shooters. all black people are not to blame for black shooters. All Jewish people would not be, responsible for all Jewish shooters. I'm just saying the guy might not be white. You have the whole mainstream media saying take guns away, shut 8chan down, pass gun legislation, white people are bad, and his father standing behind the Star of David. I'm not saying his father's Jewish. I have no idea, but isn't that a little strange? His father works with, or his father is renting out a space to healers that were trained by John of God, and then his son shoots up a thing. And my question is, why is no journalist, is anybody trying to figure out what DNA and what race he is? And the reason I say that is because I noticed, and this is no disrespect, obviously, I have white supremacists mad at me sometimes. You're not white enough. You don't stand up for the white race. Okay. Sometimes Jewish people get mad at me for saying certain things. Mostly no one really cares because they know I'm not lying and they know I'm not being mean or hateful. But I noticed a year ago, I had no idea, I was watching an interview and I saw the interviewer who I thought was white. They said, do you want White History Month? And the interviewer said, no, I'm not white, I'm Jewish. And then I started noticing a trend. I didn't realize that, but Jewish isn't just a religion, it's a race as well. And people are, they're like, I'm not white, I'm Jewish. I'm not saying all. I have some Jewish friends who just say I'm white. But a lot of Jewish people are very, heritage proud. So the point I'm getting to is if the entire media is saying white supremacy, white supremacists, and this guy ends up being Jewish and not even white, it's a little bit strange. And I do want to say as well, just on this note, on a side note, there's nothing wrong with being Jewish. There's nothing wrong with being white. There's nothing wrong with being black. There's nothing wrong with being Christian. There's nothing wrong with being Muslim. But when it comes to, the Jewish heritage, which I've been learning, I'm not saying that everybody or all, but it seems like they're very proud of their heritage. They have a country of Israel where the main leadership tells, this was a mainstream publication, they said recently that Israel is the state of the Jewish people. It's not yours. It's for Jews only. But you can live there, but it's not for you. This is not a fringe group. This is their main leadership saying, this is our state. Point I'm getting to is imagine if Donald Trump ever said that. Imagine if Donald Trump said, America is for white Christians. You could live here, but it's not for you. Donald Trump could never do that. But in Israel, that's totally fine. They fly their people out for free. That's fine. I don't care about it. I'm just saying, when you have a guy who writes a manifesto that's anti-race mixing and doesn't mention that he's white, maybe he's not white. Maybe he's Jewish. And his father's standing behind a Star of David. It's not to blame all Jewish people, just like I wouldn't blame all white people. I'm just saying the media seems to not want to cover this. And not only the John of God connection, which is strange, not suggestive, not for sure, interesting, at a time when Jeffrey Epstein's in prison. And I find that to be very, very, very odd. And I talked about it the other day too, where it's like if the shooter's left wing, it's white people to blame, it's conservatives to blame, Donald Trump's to blame, America's to blame. If the shooter ends up being Jewish, no one cares at this point. They've already branded it as white supremacy. They've already, shut down 8chan, and I want to say on 8chan as well, regardless of who the shooter is or what his motives were, 8chan got shut down because they said that the shooter's manifesto was posted to 8chan. 8chan, and I'm not a fan of 8chan. I don't go on there. It's not my thing. But the whole premise of 8chan is, like free speech or whatever. You could say whatever you want. The founder of 8chan, or the leader of 8chan, came out and said the shooter did not post his manifesto to 8chan. The shooter posted his manifesto to Instagram, and then people took it from Instagram and put it on 8chan. Now 8chan's being shut down and to blame for the manifesto. Would Instagram ever get shut down? Would Twitter get shut down because both of the shooters had a Twitter? This is what they do, regardless of what the story is. It could be black, it could be white, it could be Jewish, it could be he could be half Latino at this point. It doesn't matter. He could be mentally ill. It could be planned. It could be not planned. It could be for any motive. It can be left wing. It could be right wing. It could be white supremacist. It could be Jewish supremacist. It could be, Mexican supremacist. No matter what the plot is, the media doesn't care because they push their agenda anyway. They're not looking into what race this guy is. They're not looking who his father is. They're not looking, was it pharmacy pills? Was it mental illness? Was it something more sinister? Was it not? Like, none of the pictures add up. You look at New York Post, they post 2 different pictures of the shooter That's not me doing this. I'm not trying to start a theory or a conspiracy. This is mainstream news saying, look at the shooter. And then they post another picture of him. His nose is 2 times as small. He doesn't look anything like that. His father's standing next to a Jewish star. No one's questioning it. It's not a hateful thing. It's like if his father was standing next to a Mexican flag and looked Mexican, I'd be like, are we sure this guy's white? Are we sure he's a white supremacist? He never said he was a white supremacist. That's the media said that. That's right-wing and left-wing media. I'm just like, regardless of what happens, it doesn't matter. The agenda moves forward. Democrats get more fundraising. They get a talking point for the next debate. Gun control pushes forward. Anti-white rhetoric pushes forward. Anti-Republican and conservative rhetoric pushes forward. It doesn't even matter. And it's unfortunate because with both of these shooters, it looks like the one guy, I don't guarantee you, but when it's all said and done, I don't know that he even identifies as white. He never once identified as white in his manifesto. His father's standing next to a religious star of a completely different race or religion, and no one wants to say it. I don't care. I know this is going to get misconstrued like it always does. I don't care if he's black. I don't care if he's Muslim. I don't care if he's Christian. I don't care if he's Jewish. I don't care if he identifies as an alien. I just want someone to actually know about the story. And it's just strange. When the shooter uploads his manifesto to Instagram, Instagram's not going to get taken down. But when somebody takes it on Instagram, puts it on Twitter, and puts it on 8chan, all of a sudden they shut down 8chan and blame 8chan. The shooter never even posted it to 8chan. He posted it to Instagram and then uploaded it to 8chan. And I'm just very, very confused. Very, very confused by that. And the reason I'm saying this is because if he ends up not being white, this just totally changes the plot. It's not to blame anybody, but to give you an example, I know a lot of people are confused, as I was. Judaism is not just a religion, but it's also a race. I don't even really understand it, but I know that, a lot of Jewish people are atheists. They're not even really religiously Jewish. And then I have friends that are religiously Jewish and conservative, and they say those people aren't even religious. I have a lot of friends that I talk to that have different perspectives. But the point I'm getting to is it's its own race. It's its own ethnicity to a lot of people. And they're not like, hey, I'm not white European, I'm Jewish, which is fine. But there's a difference between a white supremacist and somebody if he turns out to be Jewish. To give you an example, Ben Shapiro is constantly called a white supremacist. Ben Shapiro's not a white supremacist. He's not even really white. He's Jewish. He's a proud 100% Ashkenazi Jew. He says it all the time so he could sell DNA kits to his audience. I'm joking, but he really does that. He says, I'm 100% Ashkenazi Jew. He doesn't consider himself white. White supremacists don't like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro, according to his own stats from the ADL, he says that he's the #1 receiver of white supremacy hatred. Ben Shapiro is. So when the media calls Ben Shapiro a white supremacist, what they're doing is screwing up everything. White supremacists mostly don't like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro's not even white. So why would you call somebody who's not even white, who white supremacists hate more, why would you call him a white supremacist? It's because the media doesn't care about being accurate. They don't care about it being honest. They just say if you support President Trump, no matter your race, religion, or gender, you're a white supremacist. That doesn't help anybody. It's not true. So on that note, if this shooter ends up not being a white supremacist, that's kind of, I would say, a pretty big plot twist in my personal perspective. And the more you look into it, the more it seems like he probably isn't. But once again, I would say no media is interested in the truth. Most right-wing media is controlled. They will just cry and scream and push, anti-gun legislation just like the left wing. Most right-wingers are very, I'm not trying to knock it, but most right-wing media, they're just trying to play it safe now. They're like, we condemn, white supremacy completely. There's terrorism. We must pass Dan Crenshaw's flags legislation or whatever it's called. And you could condemn white supremacy, but the thing is, it's like, is the shooter white? Is he even white? Because his father doesn't look like it, although I'm not saying just because you stand behind a Jewish star that doesn't mean anything. That's not to blame the whole religion. That's not to blame the whole race. There's nothing anti-Semitic about it. It's just like if a shooter's black and you say he's white, that's not the right story. If Jussie Smollett puts something on his neck and he says somebody tried to hang him and it didn't happen, that's not the story. That's all I'm trying to say is I would love a real journalist or somebody to get behind this story, because the more you look into it, the less likely it seems. And even to begin with, it's all just very, 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 very sketchy. And the more I look into it, the weirder it gets. And that's why usually I like to wait a few days and really, really, really look into it. And I do want to say too, because I do know this way it goes, and regardless of if you're Jewish, if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, or you're atheist, I understand how the media works and operates at this point, and if you want to be honest about it and really stop the censorship and the anti-freedom, you have to understand it. So they want this, even if the shooter's not white, they want him to be white because white supremacy, they could push it, right-wingers will bow down to it, left-wingers will bow down to it, and then they could push forward. They can delete 8chan, they could start censoring YouTube more, they could start censoring Google more. They can, Donald Trump acts like a big tough guy on Twitter. No disrespect. I mean, he's doing a good job, I think. But he's like, Sundar Pichai or whatever his name is. He's like the Google guy. Trump's like, I'm questioning if he's rigging Google, against me or not, which is great. But who's rigging Google? Who's pulling the strings behind that? I know because they've publicly admitted that. And if I say that on the right wing and I tell my friends and I'm like, hey guys, they've admitted they're doing this, they say, oh my God, Anomaly, you're anti-Semitic. How dare you think that? I'm like, I don't think it. I have a 2-hour conversation with my Jewish buddy. He understands all this stuff. I say it to Christians sometimes and they think it's anti-Semitic. The ADL is the one that's pulling the strings behind Google's algorithm. The ADL is an international Jewish organization whose main cause is to stop anti-Semitism and stand up for the state of Israel. So you have an international Jewish organization who's telling Google to rig its search algorithms so conservative Christians, conservative Jews, anybody who doesn't go along with the mainstream liberal agenda can't make money or be there. That's who's pulling the strings. So of course, a white supremacist narrative doesn't hurt their cause because the ADL says Ben Shapiro's the number one, receiver of white supremacy, and it's really bad. And without white supremacy, how can we rig Google further? How can we? So all I'm saying is let's figure out who this guy was, why he did it, what the heck's going on with his family, and if he's even white to begin with. Not because I'm trying to defend white supremacy. White supremacy is disgusting, but so is Jewish supremacy, so is black supremacy, so is Hispanic supremacy, so is Muslim supremacy, so is Christian supremacy. Anybody who thinks they're better because of their race or religion is disgusting, but I'll give you a hint. White people get blamed when Jewish or black people do something. White supremacy gets blamed if it's a Jewish supremacist. If it's a black supremacist, it's still white people's fault. It all goes back to that. If you're Jewish, you can have your own state where it's yours and you could say it's yours and everybody can just hang out, but it's not theirs. If you're Mexican, you could do that. If you're Indian, you could do that. If you're Asian, you could do that. If you're white, not only are you not allowed to do that, which I don't think you should be able to, but then neither should anybody else. How come only white people can't even identify as themselves without bending over and saying sorry and apologizing for everything? Meanwhile, every other race and religion gets to do whatever they want. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not an identitarian. I get yelled at by overly white people all the time. They're like, wah, 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 wah. I'm like, I don't care. I don't identify by my race. I don't even identify as my country. Yeah, I'm an American, but at the end of the day, truth is the truth. And every country, every race, religion, gender can listen to what I'm saying. It's not particularly for Americans only. I'm not a big identitarian. I identify as an individual more than I do as a race or a religion. But do you not get the plot? Do you not know who's censoring things on Google and YouTube and Twitter? It's not all people, but certain people are hiding behind a certain race or religion, rigging Google, rigging everything. And if you say that, you can't say that. The right wing won't say that. The left, they'll just bow down. I'm so sorry. Let's pass gun legislation. Let's delete 8chan. Let's keep rigging. You're never gonna figure out who's rigging Google. You're gonna run in circles. Oh my God, they hate conservatives. They're rigging everybody. No one's making money anymore. Gamers can't make money. Lesbians can't make money. Liberals can't make money. No one can make money on YouTube unless you're one of the 5 major corporations. So it's not just conservatives being, censored, and it's people using a false, threat. Look at the ADL, look at who they are, look at why they're censoring people, look at what they're censoring. They're censoring censorship. If you talk about censorship, they say you're a white supremacist. If you talk about being a man, they say you're a white supremacist. If you talk about men's rights, they say you're a white supremacist. If you talk about anything under the sun, literally anything that has nothing to do with even being white, you don't even have to be white, they literally say, you're a white supremacist, you're anti-Semitic, we need to rig Google. That's who's doing it, the ADL. They're behind a lot of it, and you can't say anything. So all I'm saying is I'm not pointing fingers, I'm not hating. I don't care if it's a Christian organization, I don't care if it's a Muslim organization, I don't care if it's a Hindu organization. No organization of religious affiliation in the United States of America should be rigging the algorithm of Google. This is not my opinion. The head of the ADL is on camera saying, we're rigging Google's search results. They're rigging their algorithm for us. They didn't rig it enough. This is why we are rigging it. Like I've seen it a bunch of times, but you tell conservatives that, they don't want to hear it. They're like, no, it's liberals. Yeah, it is liberals, absolutely. But it's not all liberals. Certain liberals, if you're not, in the ADL, or you're not part of Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, you don't get to be liberal either on YouTube. I mean, they censored Dave Pakman and Jimmy Dore and, Kyle Kalinske and these type of left-wing, progressive, socialist-leaning people just as much as they do conservatives. And that's what they do. They just get you to fight. You're like, oh my God, I'm gonna tell Google that they're doing that. It's like, good luck. You're not figure out who's and that's a lot of it. They're on a video admitting that they're getting Google to rig their algorithms. So, and it goes all ways too. It's not like they're not rigging against conservative Jewish people. If you're Laura Loomer or you're any of these people, you're going down too. They're just using that religion as a shield. It's like if I said, no, I'm Christian, so, anything I do, you can't question whatsoever. But then I'm doing horrible things. And you're like, no, if you hate me, you must hate all Christians. It's like, no, I just know that you're using that as a shield to censor people in America. And so much so that it gets to the point of, and we've known this since 2016, it's like, regardless of the statistics, or regardless of the math, regardless of the science, regardless of who did it, regardless of what skin color the person is, regardless of what religion the person is, regardless of what gender the person is, regardless of their political ideology, regardless of how much medication they were on, regardless of why they did it, regardless of if they were left-wing and anti-Trump, there's still one group that gets blamed all the time for everything. And I'm just letting you know, when you really hone out and look at the plot, you need that in order to accomplish that. So without that narrative, we can't shut down websites, we can't further censor people, and that's what they're doing with this one. They're not in a rush. Why do they not talk about the Dayton shooter? The Dayton shooter doesn't fit the narrative. He's a left-wing person who, agrees with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on 99. He wanted to vote for Elizabeth Warren, so let's shut the Dayton shooter down. Well, this is perfect. Let's blow up the El Paso shooter because he's a white supremacist. Never said he was white. Father standing next to a Jewish star. Maybe isn't white. Never identified as white. Never said he was white. Didn't like Donald Trump. Said this isn't Donald Trump's fault. Didn't like conservatives. Didn't like the Republican Party. Thinks that they're weak. Thinks that they're too pro-immigrants, against race mixing, pro-environment. Thinks that humans are disgusting because they use too much plastic. Be honest about who is this guy. I don't know. I've seen the manifesto that they claim is his. I don't know that that's his. That's what the news is saying. I analyze the news. Okay, you say that's what he said? That's a lot of what I do. Even in what you're saying he said, it doesn't even add up. All we know is this guy was a pro-environmentalist, anti-race mixing person who didn't like Republicans. So how in the world is this the fault of all conservatives and all white people? And the kicker, why I made this video today, is not to blame all people, this is not anyone's fault as far as an entire group, but he probably isn't even white. And if that's the case, no one's going to care, no one's going to check, no one's going to solve it. And this is the type of stuff that I've noticed over the last couple of months, that it's the double standards that bother me. And people misconstrue and analyze what I'm doing. When there's a Republican like a Dan Crenshaw or a Ted Cruz or a Ron DeSantis or a Donald Trump, and they say we're pro-free speech, we're pro-Second Amendment, we are going to stand up for your rights, and then they use a fake narrative to then push legislation that I find is anti-First or Second Amendment, I don't care. I don't care what their skin color is. I don't care what their religion is. I don't care what their political affiliation is. I don't care that I like them. I'm going to call it out. I'm going to say, love you, Trump. Love you, Ted Cruz, Ron DeSantis. But what you're doing is actually anti-free speech. I called it out. I'm not the only one. Rabbis, Jewish lawyers called it out and said, listen, this legislation is anti-free speech. There's good people of every race, religion, and gender who say the same thing. I do that. Same when it comes to this type of stuff. I'll be like, listen, I don't know that, that's really the proper narrative here. Where it's like, if this is true, so you're using this narrative to further... I had something else to say. I kind of lost it, but I'll give you an example. This is what I was going to say. So if you're a Christian, first of all, if you're a Christian in America... pretty much most of your beliefs are pretty much illegal. Like as far as Chick-fil-A constantly under attack, even though they're popular. You can't, you don't have pretty much any power. Which television show is Christian? Which television show is pushing Christian values? Which mainstream music artist is pushing Christian values besides somewhat Kanye West, but not even really? Where is Christianity in the culture? I'll give you a hint. America's not really Christian. It was at one point, it used to be embedded in the culture. Christianity is pretty much nowhere to be found in music, entertainment, culture, mass media, social media. You lost pretty much everything. Sorry, Christians. That's fine. I don't care. When it comes to Islam, the irony is, everyone says they're so pro-Islam in the liberal media, but the strange part is Islam, if you look at it on face value, it's actually more conservative than Christianity. So how in the world are you going to hate Christians and embrace an ideology that dislikes homosexuals more than Christians, covers up women more than Christians? It doesn't make any sense. So on that value. But what I've noticed is there's a lot of anti-Christian and anti-white rhetoric in television shows, in media. I mean, a lot of these shows are super anti-white and super anti-Christian. And me, just as a little exercise period, I like to research things. I don't like when white people hate black people. I don't hate when black people hate white people. I don't deal with that well. And I deal with it fine, but I call it out whichever way I see it. So I look at these shows and people say, Anomaly, they're hating on Christians in this show. They're hating on white people. Look it up. So I look it up and I'm like, let's see who the writers are. And most of the time, the writers are Jewish. And the reason I say that is because a Christian would not be allowed to make a show about hating Jewish people. A Christian would not be able to make an anti-Jewish show. It wouldn't be allowed at all. But for some reason, Jewish people are allowed to write shows and articles and, all this stuff that's anti-white and anti-Christian. I find it a little bit strange. And for some reason, you're not allowed to say that, even though... I have Jewish friends who had the biggest television show on the planet and got kicked off TV. I'm not saying that all Jewish people are working, like I say this stuff and people, oh my God, no. I have Jewish friends. Roseanne is a good friend of mine and she got falsely kicked off television by psycho losers for having a great show. It's not like everybody's in on it or anything, but it's like if you're white and you're Christian, you're not allowed to do anything, even if it's not hateful. If you're Muslim, if you're Jewish, if you're black, if you're Hispanic, if you're anything, you're allowed to put out anti-white and anti-Christian stuff all the time. I find it very odd. And, 9 times out of 10, when there's an anti-white and an anti-Christian show, just as an exercise, go look at who's writing it. Go look at who's directing it. Go look at who's, pushing these messages to America. It's quite interesting, That's all I'm going to say. And it's like, you're not even allowed to point that out. It's like, okay, we can just act like it's not happening. And the censorship, the anti, America stuff is not cool. I don't agree with censorship. I don't even know 8chan, to be honest. I've had one person that showed me what it was one time. I've never... it's like a message board or it's some sort of like free speech where like anything goes on 8chan. It's not even my website. I'm not interested in it, but I don't know that it should it be shut down because a manifesto was posted to 8chan, even though it was posted to Instagram first. I don't know that I agree with that. I think they should monitor 8chan because I do think there are some psychos on there and they definitely should keep an eye on it. It does seem like a place where extremism rises and it's not cool, but should you delete it? Should you be rigging Google's algorithms? Should we have, I don't know. I think that leads to very bad times. And before I'm even American, I mean, of course, yeah, I love America, but like, I'm very pro free speech. And it just so happens that every time anti-free speech stuff comes, tragedy, this, that, let's usher it in. It's always the most dishonest people. It's always the biggest liars who don't want people to say certain things. It's not like real hate's being weeded out. You get what I'm saying? I would be okay with real death threats, real hate. It's not being weeded out. You have CNN and blue checkmark journalists and TV producers openly calling for the eradication of people who support the President of the United States. All of the open violence and threats is coming mostly from the left wing. Doesn't matter. Okay. We're gonna start censoring cartoons now because Ben Garrison, that, and the right wing says, oh yeah, that cartoon is too controversial. I mean, just give up. If you consider yourself a conservative, you get to dance around PragerU and Turning Point USA and Fox News all the time, and you're offended by a cartoon of Netanyahu and Donald Trump, just hang it up and admit you're not a conservative. You're a complete liar. I say this because once you get rid of one cartoon, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Christianity, atheism, black, white, now you go further and further and further. I'm sorry. I want cartoons to be allowed. I want free speech to be allowed, open dialogue and open discussion. Because when you don't allow that, that's when people become more extreme. And you have this shooter who was feeling all sorts of ways. And then you had the left-wing shooter who was feeling all sorts of ways. A lot of people are mentally ill, feeling disconnected from society. And nobody's trying to have a conversation. Nobody's trying to unite the sides. I called out, Dan Bongino today on Twitter, not to be mean. I think he does good work. But he writes, I have nothing in common with the left. Nothing. We have nothing in common with left-wing people. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, you're human. You bleed the same blood. You're all Americans if you live here. You like sports. You like music. You like both sides are trying to say we have nothing in common. It's like, dude, you have human things. You're dehumanizing the other side just like the left wing does, and making the false statement that you have zero in common with them at all. Like they're some sort of animal or dogs. It's not helpful. It's not cool. Who's trying to really have a discussion? Who's trying to stop extremism? I'm going to have my buddy on later this week, my buddy Andrew Meyer. I had a 2-hour convo with him. He's a Jewish conservative. I told him this is why there's a lot of anti-Judaism and anti-Israel stuff that's rising. I said, dude, it's because these discussions aren't being allowed to have. He agrees with me. We're going to talk about it because when you don't have an alternative that's calm and rational and really will point out stuff like me, I don't hate on the left. I don't hate on the right. I call out the right. I call out the left. It's not coming from a place of hate, though. Most people, it's not so much they are hateful. They do hate entire groups of people. It's not okay. But when you don't allow that discussion to be had and you push further and further on censorship, it doesn't work. You don't allow people to be themselves. You don't allow people to have a discussion. I don't care how people feel, but if you have to constantly censor and lie and condemn and make fake narratives over everything, it's not actually stamping out extremism. And then people turn to the message boards, and then people turn to the most extreme people because they're the only ones talking about it, and then they cling on to that, just like they cling on to conspiracy theories, or they cling on to Trump, or they cling on to Rachel Maddow. People are desperate for a conversation. People are desperate for something, and there's not a lot of that. So I'm actually trying to stamp out extremism. I think it is a thing, but overall, with this stream, I just want to talk about a few things, but also, let's get the narrative straight on this shooter. I did not expect to go in this direction, but it's like, who is this guy? Why did he do it? And of course, even with his father, and I'm sure him, there's always a pharmacy connection. We can pretend like we don't. I know Fox News needs to sell pills. CNN needs to sell pills, and anybody who works with them, can't stir it up that much. But ADHD, that's what his father had. Here, you have ADHD, which basically means you don't pay attention well. They tried to give me pills in school as well. They said, you're ADHD. You know what I was? I was creative. I was smart. I was not disciplined because of maybe things that happened in my life, and nothing that I needed pills for. I didn't need benzos. I didn't need opioids. I didn't need pills. Luckily, my mom is very wise and said, my son doesn't need pills. This guy was addicted to pills for 20, 30 years, the shooter's father, and then he wrote a book about it, tried to change his ways. That's great. I'm not blaming his dad. I'm just saying this is not just a problem with his father. This is not a problem with just, shooters and stuff. Our country is not healing. You're not allowed to have a conversation. You're not allowed to support traditional values of like actually having family and structure in your lives. You're not allowed to have God. You're not allowed to do anything. And then you just get pills thrown at you. It's a recipe for disaster. Outside of the free speech thing, which I'm going to talk about later with my buddy Andrew later this week, these are conversations we need to have. And overall, like I said with this one, who is the shooter? Can we please make sure he's actually white, since everybody and their mama, every celebrity, every right-winger, every left-winger has blamed, white supremacy, which is fine. I'm willing to talk about white supremacy, but it's like on a general scale, it's like white supremacy's here. Other supremacies can be all over the place, but you're not allowed to mention it. Everything is that. It's like, let's be honest a little bit. So let's figure out who this guy was. Somebody, some journalist, some news source. Was the shooter even white? Maybe something to check, since the major narrative in this country from the right and left is white supremacy did this. No mention of left-wing ideology, which it shouldn't. It's not to blame, but I mean, it's ridiculous. But that's kind of what we get when something like Vegas happens and 100 people or so die. I think a little bit less. No motive, no follow-up. It's just like, oh, that's what the media said. It's unfortunate, but if you don't solve something, it's never going to stop. And that's kind of like, Trump is important in the sense of people are actually being held accountable. The media is being held accountable. Other politicians are slowly being held accountable. People like Jeffrey Epstein and John of God are being held accountable. And the reason that's important is because if you're not held accountable for something you do, especially if it's a sex slave child farm or something, starting wars or lying to people, lying through media, if you never get held accountable, no one's ever going to stop, So it's like, that's kind of my main thing. I don't like to start conspiracy theories. I don't like to be one of those person who blames everything and says, but already with this narrative, one way or the other, regardless of what race the shooter really was, the narrative has been a total lie already. So it's like, are we really trying to stop shooters when you don't even tell the truth about what his manifesto said? It said nothing, very few. Yeah, there was anti-immigrant rhetoric, but there was also anti-Republican rhetoric, pro-environment rhetoric. Tell the full story, or else nothing matters. And if people don't, get to the bottom of this, which people are starting to do, it's never going to change, because you start to notice with Fox News and a lot of these mainstream conservatives, all they know how to do is condemn. And people are confused. Why are they passing anti-gun legislation? Why is Dan Crenshaw doing that? Like, why is Donald Trump doing that? I tried to tell you a few months ago, I'm not trying to be mean, Dan Crenshaw's great when it comes to the border, but he already pretty much is anti-free speech in my perspective. Him, DeSantis, Ted Cruz, they're doing better than the left, I guess, but it's like, I told you, like, Dan Crenshaw's not who people think he is. He's a great guy. I'm sure he's a good politician. He's doing better than most, but this is to be expected. Fox News, Tucker does a good job. Occasionally Hannity makes sense and does really good work, and I think Fox News is doing way better than CNN or MSNBC, but I don't watch them for a reason. I can identify their, structure of how they work. I can see that they're slipping into liberalism. I could see that there's only a certain level you're allowed to go on Fox News. Like, Fox is not going to do a report that dives deep. Fox isn't going to, they're going to give you just enough to rile you up and make you vote for Trump and Republicans, but it'll be like, yeah, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the squad, it's really bad. Like, they're not gonna get to the core of it. They'll get here and make you feel like you're doing something. And I think that's what people on both sides need to do, because until something gets solved, and this is on Trump, this is on our Justice Department, this is some things that are bigger than us as well. Like, I can't bust open the crackpot of everything bad that's going on in society. I have no idea. But I know for Trump or anyone, until something gets further really, exposed or exploited or shown, why would they stop? If any shooting leads to the same narrative, regardless of the race, regardless of their ideology, regardless of the reason, regardless of the motive, why would it stop? When we don't get to the root of why they're happening, when we can't even get to the root of who the people are or why they did it. I mean, with the El Paso shooter, not only are they potentially wrong about his race, the pictures don't even add up. And I'm not one of those guys. I try to be like, guys, stop making everything a conspiracy theory. I'm not a big overly theorist, but the pictures don't add up at all. I mean, I could show you the New York Post. The one, he's got a little round head, looks Mexican. The other one, he's got a huge nose and glasses on. It's like, that's not the same guy. So no one's doing journalism. No one's like getting to it. It's like, okay, well, I guess we could just condemn white supremacy and act like this stuff's going to go away. We'll not talk about pharmacy. We'll not do a deep dive on who it was, why it happened. I'm very, very skeptical. And when I saw, basically, during the Trump campaign, there was Democratic operatives caught on Project Veritas who said that they were going to pay mentally ill people to start violence outside of Trump rallies because the media will cover it and then they'll have a story. I saw that with my own eyes. Made no sort of movement in the media. So now I'm telling myself, this stuff's not going to end because they did it. They got caught doing it. They whispered it, push it across, and you never hear about it. So it's like, it's just the same sad story over and over, unfortunately, that nobody on either side seems to really want to get to the bottom of. And that's what I do. When it comes to censorship, where's it coming from? How do we stop it with logic and value and truth and compassion, not just keep pointing fingers? Let's see what you guys are talking about. Someone said, it's just nuts. Malcolm X really nailed it a couple years ago, 30, 40 years ago. He said, the media controls the minds of the masses. They have the power to make the guilty look innocent and the innocent look guilty. And that's unfortunately just true. When you have a camera, when you have the media, they can say that Jussie Smollett hung himself or someone attacked him when it never happened. They have the power to change the race of the shooter. They have the power to cover up every single shooting that doesn't fit their narrative and broadcast one that does fit their narrative. Even if it doesn't fit their narrative, they can create the headline, the picture, the repetitiveness, repeat it. And now it's on every Instagram. What if this shooter turns out not to be white? Does it even matter at this point? Rihanna said it, Cardi B said it, Fox News said it, Ben Shapiro said it, Trump said it, Ivanka Trump said it, I said it, everyone said it a million times. I'm probably the only person speculating if it's not even true, maybe like 10 other people. The other 10,000 people already said it. So at this point, the damage is truly done. It's like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he was pro-environment. It doesn't matter that what the truth is. It doesn't matter why he did this. It doesn't matter his mental state. It doesn't matter who was involved. It doesn't matter which picture the kid is. They've got their narrative. It's white supremacy's to blame. Guns are to blame. Donald Trump and Dan Crenshaw better pass that act or else they're going to be very complacent. I even have right-wing women coming to me. Anomaly, we have to do something. The shooter of Dayton was pro-gun control. This shooter had a certain agenda that he was looking forward to. Why would we do what they want us to do? You get what I'm saying? It's just like, if somebody shot people because he wanted gun control, and then you pass gun control, why would people stop doing it? What's their motivation to stop if every time they do something, they get the attention, they get the support, they get their narrative passed, they get their agenda, they get their fundraising, they get it all. There's no motivation. It's like the welfare system. I want to help people, but if you give people, $100,000 for having 7 kids and not having a husband, people aren't going to stop doing it magically if you keep rewarding them for doing it. And that's unfortunately what both sides of the media do. And our politicians, regardless of what happens, regardless of why it happens, regardless of who did it, regardless of the true story, they're going to slowly pass their agenda. And this is not something that Trump started or Obama started. I want to say this too, then I'm really going to leave. Last week, they said that conspiracy theories, mainly the Q conspiracy theory, but conspiracy theories can now be considered domestic terrorism. So let's follow through how it happens. All right, so 9/11 happens, and George Bush says we need to pass this act because we need to stop terrorists. Unfortunately, terrorist is a very broad term. So now George Bush passes the Patriot Act, where you can pretty much tap anyone for any reason under the disguise of terrorism. So, Obama gets in office, he passes some weird stuff, he gives the president more executive orders, so much stuff, propaganda acts, the right to basically hold people without trial and do all this stuff. So now Obama gets all this bigger executive power. Bush has the right to, tap your phone or basically do whatever they want to if you're a terrorist. And then this year, they say that people that like conspiracy theories can now be considered a terrorist. Do you get the plot now? So now it went from we're going for terrorists to everybody's a terrorist to, if you question the narrative, you're a terrorist. And HN needs to be taken down, even though they weren't the one who posted it, to, they're broadening to the point where speech is going away, free speech is getting smaller, their ability to basically label you and target you is getting broader and broader, and thanks to Obama and Bush, they have the right to do it. And unfortunately, as much as I like Trump and a lot of conservatives, they're not saying anything. They're not, they're just kind of pushing it further. And I'm not saying that Trump's not good or anything, but it's like, isn't that weird that the same week that, and this is, I don't even go on the website, but 4chan and 8chan are like message boards. That's where the QAnon narrative is being posted. And I've been very critical of the QAnon supporters. I feel like a lot of them lose it a little bit and get a little crazy. However, I've never really been a hater. I just said, hey guys, watch who you accuse and what you do. So QAnon posts on 4chan and 8chan. Articles come out last week saying that anybody involved in message boards is potentially a terrorist. Then somebody does a shooting. They get potentially his race wrong. They get his whole political ideology wrong. They lie about where he uploaded it to. He uploaded it on Instagram. They blame the same message board that they just called you a terrorist for basically reading. So, the plot is a little bit obvious. And then you have Epstein doing the same thing that John of God was doing, possibly with like all the DNA, ramming it into women. I mean, and the connection there is just sketchy to say the least. So someone said, all right, Vern, you don't gotta be, no, I'm not trying to be, I'm just saying that it's something to think about. All I'm saying is, until people kind of wake up to that, which they are doing, it's gonna keep happening, So I'm not hoping it happens. I'm praying for peace and stability and stuff. But most, mainstream right wingers never get to the core. Left wing doesn't even care anymore. And overall, I just want people to have a good day, but also, have a conversation, talk about it. Talk about, censorship, maybe where it's coming from. The fact that this entire narrative doesn't make sense. And I think we've made a lot of progress over the last few years to end on a positive note. I'm not saying be nihilistic or angry or something. I always say the opposite of that. I'm just saying it's like, I'm faithful and I'm happy, but I see, if Trump and Crenshaw and all these people, if they do stuff that I don't agree with, I'm just going to call it out. I'm not mad at them. I'm not giving up or anything. It's just like, I don't know. To me, that makes more sense than ignoring it and just repeating everything that they say. Let me read what Bongino said today. And he's a good guy. I like what he does a little bit, but he said, we share absolutely nothing in common with liberals anymore. Nothing. We share absolutely nothing in common with liberals anymore. We're human. We breathe air. We bleed the same blood. We have hobby. We have sports and music. I don't know. I would think a better strategy would be, trying to have a conversation with them, getting them to see what's going on, rather than just saying we have zero in common. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's a good strategy. Maybe that's going to get to the core of this stuff. I don't think so, though. I don't agree with that very much, and I feel like that's kind of what most of the right does. So overall, have a good day. Let me know what you're feeling. I just thought this stuff was interesting, and it's interesting. It's creepy, and it's also just it's tough to really figure out what to do, because it does need to come from a high level. But I do think Trump is a huge start to really stirring up the pot and shaking up the stuff. And I honestly do think behind the scenes, Trump is doing a lot. Even the fact that someone like Epstein got arrested, and in Brazil, the reason that John of God got arrested was because of Bolsonaro. So, I believe, I'm not sure. So, the progress is being made. I just think it's our, it's our duty as citizens to, question, learn, and don't just blindly throw yourself all in with these people, because I find, like I said, I'm going to end on this note because I'm not trying to be like a downer, but a lot of people are sick of being lied to, so they cling on to a Cortez, they cling on to a Rachel Maddow, they cling on to a Trump, they cling on to a Crenshaw or a Nikki Haley. You can like them, you can agree with a lot of stuff they're doing, but that's kind of how politicians operate. It's like, scare the crap out of you, let's vote for John McCain. Scare the crap out of you, let's vote for Obama, he'll be different. Scare the crap out of you, let's vote for this guy. Trump to me is obviously different, but he's not the be all end all. And everybody, like Ted Cruz, just to be honest, I don't think Ted Cruz now would be Ted Cruz now without Donald Trump. I don't think Sean Hannity now would be Sean Hannity if there was no Trump. A lot of people shift because of people who come through. So just keep it real, just question. I don't want you to cling to everything I say, I don't want you to look at me like, oh my God, everything Anomaly says is 100% true and right, and I will follow him into the dark wilderness no matter what he does, no matter what legislation he passes or pushes. Don't do that with me either. Like me, appreciate the value there is in what I'm talking about, but overall, question what I say. Sometimes I don't know a lot. Yesterday I did a whole stream and learned more, and now, so don't blindly follow me. Don't blindly follow like Crenshaw. Don't think they're the be-all, end-all. That's the trick. Love yourself. Love God if that's what you do. If not, you don't have to. I'm not going to force religion or God on you. But, have faith in yourself. Keep it real with yourself. Keep it real with, God and the universe. And then the rest will fall into place. But if you're looking for someone to fill that void, in my personal perspective, we will constantly just keep getting lied to. And I think that's happening quite a bit. But overall, I'm not trying to blame anybody. It's like, this narrative is just really weird. I would love if a real journalist got to the bottom of it. Which race is this guy? Like, why is there so much creepy stuff going on around it? How are we going to solve it? How are we going to stop this from happening? And why is the mainstream right wing just fold without questioning it? We need to question this stuff. Not in a mean way, not to attack people, not to harm anyone or anyone's family, but it's like, if stuff doesn't get solved, it's not going to stop. So a lot of this stuff that I talk about, that they would probably try to frame me as a theorist, it's mainstream news that these type of stuff happens. I saw it last year. I saw it 2 years ago. I saw it on CBS. There's been stuff like that, and, one way or the other, we got to get to the root of it, whether it's mental health, whether it's ideology, whether it's, terrorism, you could call it what you want, but I feel like no one's really trying to get to the core. Let me know what you guys think. God bless you, appreciate you, and hopefully we'll get back to some other stuff. I don't like talking about tragedies. Maybe I'll just go full wild and talk about the moon tonight. You guys want me to talk about the moon? Then I'll really get my page demonetized. But overall, maybe. Have a good day, guys.